Imagine a city with thousands of people, its own power systems, its own airport, its own hospitals, its own restaurants, its own security forces, its own logistics network. Now imagine that entire city moving across the ocean at high speed, completely isolated, completely self-sufficient, capable of operating anywhere on Earth. That sounds impossible, and yet it already exists. These are aircraft carriers, often described as warships, but that description barely captures their true scale, because an aircraft carrier is not simply a ship carrying airplanes. It is a floating ecosystem, a mobile military base, a moving city built from steel, engineering, and logistics. And behind its massive flight deck lies one of the most astonishing machines humanity has ever created. The ship that shouldn't exist. The first thing that surprises most people about an aircraft carrier is its size. Photos rarely do them justice. From a distance, they appear large, but manageable. Then a person stands beside one, and suddenly, the scale becomes difficult to comprehend. Modern aircraft carriers can stretch well over 300 meters in length. Their displacement reaches astonishing levels. Their flight decks cover enormous areas. From above, they resemble floating airports. From sea level, they feel more like moving islands. The engineering challenge begins with a simple question. How do you build something this enormous and keep it floating safely in some of the harshest oceans on Earth? The answer involves decades of naval engineering, structural design, and advanced materials. Every section of the vessel must withstand immense stress, constant vibration, powerful ocean forces, and years of continuous operation. Because unlike ordinary ships, aircraft carriers are not merely transporting cargo. They are supporting an entire airborne ecosystem. Some aircraft carriers are larger than many skyscrapers are tall, but size alone isn't what makes them extraordinary. Because a giant ship is impressive. A giant ship that launches aircraft in the middle of the ocean is something entirely different. An airport in the middle of the ocean, every airport on Earth depends on infrastructure, runways, control towers, fuel systems, maintenance crews, emergency services. Now imagine building all of that on a moving platform surrounded by water. That is exactly what aircraft carriers do. Every takeoff requires coordination. Every landing requires precision. The flight deck operates as a highly choreographed environment where mistakes can have serious consequences. Aircraft launch. Aircraft recover. Crews move continuously. Signals are exchanged rapidly. Decisions happen in seconds. And unlike a normal airport, the runway itself is moving, pitching with waves, turning through the ocean, operating in changing weather conditions. Pilots must land on a target far smaller than a traditional runway, a target that never stops moving. Which is why carrier operations are often considered among the most demanding forms of aviation. The margin for error is extremely small, yet these operations happen repeatedly, day after day, night after night, across oceans around the world. Landing on an aircraft carrier has often been compared to landing on a moving postage stamp in the middle of the sea. But an airport alone does not make a city, because cities need people, and aircraft carriers carry a lot of them. Thousands of people living at sea. One of the most remarkable aspects of an aircraft carrier is the number of people required to keep it operating. Thousands. Pilots, engineers, technicians, medical personnel, maintenance crews, air traffic controllers, logistics specialists, security teams, cooks, electricians, communications experts, and countless others. Each person plays a role. Each system depends on another. Together they create a self-contained community operating far from land. Life aboard an aircraft carrier resembles life inside a compact city. People work, eat, sleep, exercise, receive medical care, attend briefings, maintain equipment, and support operations around the clock. The ship never truly sleeps. Somewhere on board, someone is always working. Someone is always monitoring systems. Someone is always preparing for the next operation. And because missions can last for months, the carrier must provide everything necessary to sustain life at sea, which creates an entirely new engineering challenge, supporting an entire population far from civilization. A large aircraft carrier can house more people than many small towns. And keeping thousands of people alive at sea requires something most passengers never think about. Infrastructure. Lots of infrastructure. The hidden city inside the hull, beneath the flight deck, lies a hidden world. Corridors stretch through the ship, Workshops operate continuously. Medical facilities stand ready. Storage rooms hold enormous quantities of supplies. Food preparation areas serve thousands of meals every day. The scale is staggering. Fresh water must be produced. Waste must be managed. Electricity must be generated. Air systems must function continuously. Communications must remain operational. Everyday conveniences that people take for granted on land become engineering challenges at sea. And because aircraft carriers may spend long periods away from port, reliability becomes essential. Everything must work. And when something fails, crews must often repair it themselves. The carrier effectively becomes its own city government, utility provider, transportation hub, and emergency response system, all contained within a floating steel structure. Some aircraft carriers produce millions of liters of fresh water every month while operating at sea, but powering a city requires energy, and aircraft carriers require an astonishing amount of it. The power plant that never stops. Few people realize how much energy an aircraft carrier consumes. Lighting, computers, communications, radar systems, workshops, aircraft support equipment, living quarters. Every system demands power, enormous amounts of power. Some carriers operate with power generation capabilities that rival small municipalities. The ship effectively becomes a floating power plant. Electricity flows constantly throughout the vessel, supporting thousands of people and countless machines. Without power, operations stop. Life aboard becomes dramatically more difficult, and critical systems become unavailable, which is why redundancy is everywhere. Backup systems, emergency systems, multiple layers of protection. Because reliability is not optional, it is essential. A city cannot function without electricity. Neither can an aircraft carrier. The electrical systems aboard an aircraft carrier support one of the most complex operating environments ever placed at sea. Yet perhaps the most impressive part of an aircraft carrier isn't the ship itself. It's the enormous logistics machine keeping it alive. The impossible logistics of a floating city. Think about what a city consumes every day. Food, water, fuel, medical supplies, replacement parts, equipment. Now imagine transporting all of it across the ocean. Aircraft carriers depend on one of the most sophisticated logistics systems ever developed. Supplies must arrive continuously. Aircraft require maintenance. Parts require replacement. Crews require food. Operations require resources. And all of it must be coordinated with remarkable precision. A single deployment can involve vast quantities of supplies. Everything must be planned carefully, because unlike cities on land, there is no nearby supermarket. No hardware store, no convenient delivery service. Every item matters. Every shipment matters. Every logistical decision matters. And behind every successful deployment exists an enormous support network operating quietly behind the scenes. A hidden machine supporting the floating city. Keeping an aircraft carrier operational requires a supply chain stretching across oceans and continents. And when you step back and look at the entire picture, you begin to realize something remarkable. Why they are more than. Aircraft carriers are often categorized as warships, and technically, that is true. But the description feels incomplete, because very few ships contain airports. Very few ships support thousands of residents. Very few ships generate their own utilities. Very few ships operate like self-contained ecosystems. Aircraft carriers blur the line between vessel and city, between transportation and infrastructure, between machine and community. They represent one of humanity's most ambitious engineering achievements, not because they are merely large, but because they combine thousands of complex systems into a single moving platform, a platform capable of operating almost anywhere on Earth, for extended periods, far from civilization, while carrying civilization with it. At first glance, an aircraft carrier appears to be a giant ship carrying airplanes, but beneath that image lies something far more impressive: a floating airport, a power plant, a logistics hub, a residential community, a maintenance center, a medical facility, and an engineering masterpiece, all operating together as a single machine. Because aircraft carriers are not simply vessels, they are floating cities. Cities built to move. Cities built to survive. Cities built to operate in one of the most challenging environments on Earth. And perhaps that's what makes them so fascinating. Not their size, not their power, not even the aircraft they carry, but the fact that humanity found a way to place an entire city in the middle of the ocean and make it work. What surprised you most about aircraft carriers? Their size? Their airport operations? Their floating city infrastructure? Or the thousands of people living aboard? Let us know in the comments. But aircraft carriers aren't the only engineering marvels operating at sea, because some ships are responsible for moving the global economy itself.